And for today's Power Hour, we're going to be talking about alt text. My name is Allie Bartley. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Digital Accessibility Training and Outreach Manager at the Digital Accessibility Office. Some of you know me. I know I got a lot of familiar names and faces in here, but for those who don't know me, thanks for coming today and joining and getting a chance to learn about alt text. If you're not familiar with it, or you may be already. Hopefully, you'll still get to learn some new info. I always like to just start off with just some Zoom logistics for training. Feel free to keep your cameras off, whatever's comfortable for you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns at any point throughout the training, communicate those however you want and whenever you want. You can throw things in the chat. I try to keep my eye on it as much as I can. I got two screens, so I try to keep up. Feel free to unmute, feel free to raise your hand, react, whatever feels most comfortable for you works for me. And then lastly, I believe I usually always just keep this on there, but I forgot to check in with you all before, but there should be automated captions available. It looks like the transcript is available in this Zoom meeting, which is in your Zoom menu under more, and then either show captions or transcript, depending on what you're seeing on your end.
And Allie, I can monitor the chat as you go through if you'd like.
Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And are we record? Oh, yeah, it is showing that we're recording. Okay. I didn't see it pop up for me. Okay. Our agenda for today. So we'll start off with just introducing you all to digital accessibility and kind of how our office defines it. Again, this may be repeated info for some of you. It may not be, but I just like to start off and make sure we're all kind of on the same page. And then we'll jump into kind of explaining what assistive technology is. This will really help with kind of understanding like why alt text is important, how it impacts end users, and what that experience is like for individuals who might be using assistive technology to access any websites or content that you might be creating. And then we will jump into going through alt text and providing some guidance for you all as content creators. So first off, just defining what digital accessibility is. This is not a legal definition. This is how our office, the DAO, defines it. And it's that all people should have the opportunity to access the same information and services in the digital environment without facing undue barriers or burdens. The portion of this definition that I typically like to kind of break down a bit is that last part, the undue barriers or burdens. We really just to give you kind of an example of what that looks like, right? If you're unfamiliar with digital accessibility, it is a lot of kind of background work that's done as a content creator. So it may not be super visually apparent if you're looking at maybe a document or a website that's inaccessible versus one that is accessible. There's definitely some features or accessibility practices that are very visible, but a lot of them are kind of done in the background. When we're thinking of more of like the physical space when it comes to accessibility, that may look like things that we interact with a lot in our everyday lives, right? If we see a set of stairs and there is a ramp next to it or an elevator, and we may use that if we have a stroller or we're pushing a cart or just because we don't want to walk up the stairs. Or there's accessible parking in the front of a grocery store, right? Those are things that we see as like physical attributes when we're talking about accessibility. But when it comes to digital accessibility, again, this is stuff that we kind of have to implement into our workflows as we are creating any sort of digital content to ensure that it is accessible to anyone who is coming across a website or any sort of content that you are creating. The portion, again, that I like to break down is that undue barrier or burden. So like a burden for somebody who may be using a wheelchair would be that there are a set of stairs and there is no ramp. When we're talking about the digital environment, though, that may be, for example, if there's a video online and there aren't any captions available. So that would be something that maybe somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing that would be a barrier to that individual, right? That would be something that they cannot access that video because there aren't any captions available to them. One thing that I really like to emphasize here too is that when we're talking about what I'm going to cover in the next slide, but assistive technology is something that some people with disabilities use to access and interact with the digital environment in general. So when we are creating content and those barriers or burdens pop up, That means that they may have to, go through a lot of different hoops, and that's kind of where those burdens come in, to be able to get access to something like a video that's posted online and available publicly. So that might mean that, like, the barriers that they can't access the video, and then the burden may be that they have to reach out to the office where that video lives and say, I don't have access to this video. And then that department or office may then need to get that video captioned, which definitely takes some time. Which then means that individual is not going to be able to access potentially that video until much later. So that's a lot of the time where those burdens kind of get introduced when we're talking about content and digital content that's accessible versus inaccessible. Are there any questions about like digital accessibility, just as defined here, or just and in general? Okay. Next, I want to just introduce assistive technology, because I will be kind of referring to it as we're walking through like guidance and what alt text is. So assistive technology is essentially any item or tool that's used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of persons with disabilities. It could be physical objects. One example that we might not often think of as assistive technology, but something as simple as a rubber band. That might be something that somebody who is blind or low vision may be using to wrap around a remote. There may be a rubber band at the top of the remote to kind of uh, let that user or that person know that anything that's above the top rubber band is where the power button is. And then below that rubber band might be the channel changing buttons and the volume changing buttons. And so they know that underneath the rubber band is where those live. And then if there's a second rubber band on that remote, then that might be where they know how to find the like numbers or other like features that might be on a remote. So that's just kind of one example of what like even something as simple as a rubber band might be used as in terms of assistive technology. It's assisting and improving the functional capabilities for someone who might not be able to actually see the keys or buttons on a remote. It can also be pieces of equipment, software, programs, product systems. That's kind of what we might think of more of when we're talking about assistive technology and what technology is versus things like a rubber band. But one that I will be referring to throughout today's training is a screen reader. A screen reader is a piece of technology that a lot of individuals who are blind or low vision may use to navigate through their computer or their device, whether it's their cell phone, desktop, laptop, whatever it might be. A screen reader user will only use the keys on their keyboard to navigate through all of or through anything on their device. There is no mouse functions. So there is essentially a plethora of different keyboard commands that an end user knows and learns how to use to be able to then navigate through their phone or their device. The reason why I want to kind of stress or introduce you to a screen reader specifically is not because we're only making content accessible for people who are using a screen reader. When we create content that's accessible to a screen reader user, or that then kind of works and meshes well essentially with a screen reader, that is going to then make it accessible to a bevy of other like assistive technologies that people may be using. Creating accessible digital content really impacts and benefits everybody. Even just talking about that example of closed captions, I myself am not someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, but I have ADHD, and I read every single or any video, movie, show, anything that I'm watching. I have those closed captions on because I need that kind of multimodal form of processing information. I like to watch and listen and read the closed captions, even if it's like The Office and I've watched that same episode 900 times. I still like to have those captions on because it makes it easier for me to process the information. Another thing that, again, when we're talking about accessibility benefiting everybody, captions can be really helpful for people who might be in noisy environments. A lot of us work from home. There may be kids running around or dogs or people coming to fix things in your house. It can be noisy. So it really benefits that situation, environmental situations as well. Maybe somebody who's watching a video doesn't speak the language that the video is being spoken in. So having those closed captions to follow along with as well can help with understanding that information at a deeper level. But back to screen readers. A screen reader is something that I'm going to show you a demo of. And again, we're not just making content accessible for people who do use screen readers, but our office, we test technology, documents, websites, any other digital content with a screen reader and many different screen readers because it essentially gives us a wealth of knowledge to understand whether something is accessible or inaccessible. And I'll give you a video demo of what that looks like here. This is our senior accessibility tester. She's going to be navigating through Buff Portal using her screen reading software called JAWS. That's acronym Job Access with Speech, I think is what it is. I always forget exactly the acronym. There's, as we all, I'm sure, know, there's 9 million acronyms that we have to know all the time. So it's hard to keep up. But she's going to be navigating through Buff Portal, and she's going to be walking through heading structure that exists in Buff Portal. We're obviously not going over heading structure today, so it might be kind of like not really sure what she's navigating through, but it's essentially a way for her to jump to different sections of a website very quickly and easily. For myself as a sighted user, I'm looking for things when I'm talking about heading structure. I'm looking for larger text, bolded text. Those are some visual cues that I rely on to see this is the title of this web page. These are the subtitles throughout the rest of the content to make it easier for me to jump to a section that I may be trying to get to quickly. And essentially, when we have proper heading structure, that is also something that end users who are using a screen reader can do as well. So I just wanted to kind of give you that background just in case you're like, I have no idea what this heading stuff is. Just so you can maybe understand and grasp the concept of this video a little bit better. But I will open that right now. And one thing I do want to call out here is that as she's navigating using her keyboard, there is going to be a red rectangle around whatever the screen reader is reading aloud at that time. That is called a focus indicator. And she's going to jump through different sections of this page. I will kind of use my mouse to kind of maybe circle around or point to those focus indicators. It's also going to be read out loud, but I just kind of like to use my cursor to point at it as well, because sometimes it's a little bit hard to follow. And you can all let me know if you want me to like replay or go back to a certain section if we missed it.
Okay, so today we are going to demonstrate the importance of proper heading structure and how that assists users in navigating websites more efficiently.
Buff Portal heading level 1.
This is the heading level 1, which tells users the title of the page. And
could you increase the volume of this a bit?
Yeah, I got a new laptop when I was just on campus a little bit ago, and it's very quiet, and I've got everything up max. I'm sorry, I wish it was a little bit louder. Yeah, I apologize. Everything's up as high as it can go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Oops.
Sure of Seed Holders Buff Portal. I know that every card on Buff Portal is assigned a heading level 2. So I can either navigate by heading structure using the shortcut key H, like I just did to get to the heading level 1, or I can press the number 2 and navigate between cards if I'm looking for a specific card. So I will demonstrate that now.
Calls and detachments heading level 2. Your classes heading level 2. Buff info help heading level 2. Grades and GPA heading level 2. Class schedule heading level 2. Enrollment dates heading level 2. Tuition and fees heading level 2. No more headings at level 2 in this section.
So that is all of the cards on Buff Portal. And then
so she'll just keep navigating kind of through the rest of the headings in there, but that was just to kind of give you an example. Many people haven't really heard a screen reader before. So I do just kind of like to give that demo so that you can kind of see how it works, see how our senior accessibility tester kind of navigates through content. using those different shortcut keys. Again, I apologize about the volume. I've been trying to figure that out since I got my new laptop. It's very even quiet. It's at 100% for me, and I still feel like it's quiet. So I gotta figure that out. But thank you for that feedback. I will work on that. And thank you for putting the link to the video in there as well. I believe that's what it is. I didn't click on it, but I'm assuming so. All right. Do we have any questions on oh, perfect. Do we have any questions about assistive tech as a whole, or a screen reader, or comments, anything that anyone wants to share or ask? Okay, awesome.
I have a
Yeah.
thing I'll share.
Yeah.
So I'm Matthew. I'm a data librarian in the Center for Research Data and Digital Scholarship, and I have produced an audio version of a book chapter I wrote once. And so that's available in CU Scholar, our institutional repository. So you can download a PDF of the chapter, but there's also an MP3 version that you can download.
Awesome. Yeah, love that. We always love, I mean, as far as like creating accessible content, just kind of a general like bit of guidance or tip that we always say is like give everybody options, right? Like
Yep.
giving people options is always great, whether it's something that you need because you need it to access information, or it's just something that's going to be really easy to use. Maybe you have a commute and being able to just listen to that in your car on the way home. Like, again, that's another way that making accessible stuff is really going to benefit everybody. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for
So
sharing.
yeah, if there are any people that are writing journal articles or anything that want to produce their own audio versions, that they can put those into CU Scholar.
Awesome. Good to know. Thank you. And assistive tech, like and as far as digital accessibility goes too, like there's so many things I think that a lot of us use that we don't really realize is, something that was either created to increase access or that is assistive technology or digitally accessible. I use dark mode on a lot of things that I use, and that was an accessibility feature that's created for accessibility. Even automatic doors, soap dispensers, water, when we're washing our hands, sinks. I couldn't think of that word. But all of those are things that were created to increase access for people with disabilities. So there's a lot of things that we use in our everyday lives that we might not necessarily know are things that were created for people with disabilities to increase access. And we, whether we have a disability or not, everyone's really benefiting from a lot of those things that were created. All right, now let's get into alt text. Okay, so alt text is it's text that conveys the meaningful content of an image concisely to someone who cannot see that image. So it's essentially going to be read aloud using a screen reader by an end user when there's an image present. When we add alt text onto images that we are putting into our content, whether it's WebExpress or documents or anywhere else, it's typically not going to be visible on your document, but it will be read by assistive technology. The only time where it may be visible to an end user or yourself is if you have like low bandwidth or an image isn't loading. We often see a little icon and we know that there's an image there, but it might not be loading. Any text that's below that image is the alt text. So even if you are experiencing internet issues, there will still be alt text so you can get a sense of what is there that we can't actually see. If we are creating content and using images and not adding alt text to those images, then a screen reader is essentially going to try to grab whatever it can to give an end user something. So if there is an image and there's no alt text, it's either going to try to read the file name of that image, or the screen reader is just going to read blank. So the image I have here on the screen is an aerial view of CU Boulder. And then I have two screenshots from a free screen reader that's built into Mac or Apple products. So if you have an iPhone or you have a MacBook, this is something that you could use and just kind of like test out and see how it works. So it's called VoiceOver. And the first example I have here is what would be read if there was alt text on this image, and this is what would be read to the end user. So the alt text that the content creator wrote was aerial view of CU Boulder. So that's the alt text that's read to the end user. The rest of the screenshot there says in line with text, comma, image. That is just formatting information that's then read to the end user. So the first part is all you really need to concern yourself with as far as being the content creator and writing alt text. The rest of that information is just, again, formatting info to let the end user know this is an image and that was just the alt text that was read. And the image is positioned in line with text. It's not wrapped or floating. Again, not really necessarily important things for you to know as the content creator, but just to kind of show you that end user experience. The second screenshot I have here is of VoiceOver reading this image if there was not alt text added to it. And it would read screenshot 2019-06-26 at 9:15:40 p.m.png image. So obviously we can see the difference there. One is significantly more descriptive. It lets everybody know what that image is, what it's representing. Just hearing a screenshot with a bunch of numbers and timestamps and dates is very undescriptive, and an end user who might not visually be able to see that image would have no clue what that image is, and they're going to be missing out on that information and that content. So now we'll go into some guidance for you all to write alt text yourself. We always kind of say that alt text is more of an art than a science. There's a lot of nuance when it comes to digital accessibility as a whole, but also especially like alt text. There are so many different instances of different images that we're using. So this is just kind of broader, generalized like guidance. But if you have specific questions, please feel free to stop me and ask me, and I'm happy to kind of walk through those with you. But just to start, first of all, your alt text as you're writing it should always be short and concise. Approximately 150 characters or 1 to 2 sentences is kind of the general rule of thumb when it comes to alt text. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that you should always prioritize an accurate description over worrying too much about if I have 3 sentences, it's not the end of the world. If that means that it's a better, experience for an end user because you have 3 sentences or 175 characters, that's fine. We'd prefer erring on that side of a more accurate description than worrying too much about length of the alt text there. You may have situations where you are using an image that requires really detailed alt text. Oftentimes we see that in like graphs or charts, infographics. Like there's a lot of information. Maybe there's like 50 data points to a graph or something like that. If that's the case, I recommend writing some generalized alt text in the alt text field of the image. So you may say like a graph explaining, X, Y, and Z. The range is from on the x-axis from this to this, and the range along the y-axis is from this to this. If there are specific trends, like why you're using that graph or chart, maybe if there's specific trends to really like why you're using that image is to demonstrate those trends, that's something you could also kind of explain in the alt text if that's something that feels contextually important and meaningful. But if it is like definitely very important to know every single data point of a graph or a chart, and you want everybody to be able to access that information, that may be an instance where you write that more generalized alt text, and then in the body of maybe the text that you have surrounding that image, that would be a good place to maybe actually list out all of those data points or a more detailed description if it feels necessary. Because if you were to write all that in your alt text field, then you may be writing a short novel in there. And again, like we said, we want to keep it kind of short and concise if possible. So there's definitely situations where there may just be way more that we need to include. Still write your alt text, give it a broader description, and then you can even write in the alt text field to kind of let somebody, like an end user, know that there is more information about that image. You can put that generalized alt text and then at the end of it say like data points included in the body of the text below, or data points, or how you can kind of direct an end user to say like there is more information, and let them know that that is available and that it's going to be maybe following the image or before the image or somewhere else. But directing an end user can be really helpful. So if that's the case, you can absolutely do that in your alt text field. You're always going to start with the most important or essential information or the subject of the image. So if you're using a picture of somebody that's standing on campus and there's birds flying in the background, you don't need to include things like the birds flying in the background. Start with the person, right? That's the subject. That's the thing that is the main point of the image and why you're using it. Start with describing that. And you are going to be omitting starting your alt text with the phrase image of. It's kind of a hard one to get out of your brain because I mean, I've been in this field for a very long time and I still am thinking this is an image of blah, 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 blah. But we're not going to include that actually in the alt text that we're writing because as we saw on the last slide, a screen reader is announcing that it is an image. So if I said image of aerial view of CU Boulder, and then it would read image at the end, then now that's a little bit repetitive. So that's something that you can omit. You can just jump straight into describing the image and not really including like that it is an image of because an end user is going to know that it's an image of whatever you're including there. There may be instances where you're describing an image that's like an icon or an illustration or like a cartoon or an animation, anything like that. If there are like specific instances, again, this is why we say it's more of an art than a science. But if there's specific instances where you're using like a graphic or if it's a screenshot, like I'll say it's a screenshot if I'm maybe writing out tutorials. This is a screenshot from Microsoft Word to let people know like the context, right? That is important context. But you can say things like that versus image of. So there's kind of some instances where like you are using phrases that are kind of similar or parallel to image of, but it is more based on the context of the image versus just saying it's an image. If you're using a graphic or like a cartoon or an animation of something, and it feels, again, contextually important to say that that's what it is, go ahead and include it. If it doesn't really make a difference either way, then you don't need to. But you as the subject matter expert or the content creator, you'll kind of know that as you are creating your content. So just kind of keep that in mind that there are instances where you can use similar phraseology, but you don't always need to include it if it doesn't feel like it's going to make a difference kind of either way, whether you include that description or not. Yeah, Mariah, hi.
Hi, good to see you. I
Good
have
to
a
see you.
question.
Yes.
So like a lot of times in designs, I'm using icons and then it'll like have words underneath the icon, like health or
Hmm.
something like that. When I'm tagging a PDF, do I need to tag that icon as like icon of health, or would that be a decorative image?
That's a good question. It would kind of depend. I'm trying to picture like context with that. So like if there's like a heading that is designating that this is health, then that's it. If it's yeah, like if there's a heading that's saying that before that or kind of with it, then you could mark it as decorative. If it's just an icon, if it's like, I don't know, like a cross sign, like the nurse sign or something like, or the, first aid kind of cross, and then it says health underneath it. That could be, I mean, it could be decorative if you feel like it's obvious elsewhere in the body of the text that it is the health like kind of section you're creating. You could mark it as decorative. It'll kind of depend on the context. But in that instance, just kind of generally, like I would say you could write alt text and say that it's an icon of health or like health icon. Like icons are, we use them mostly for kind of that decorative purpose, right?
Right.
So yeah. So it definitely depends on the context. If you feel like it's not contextually apparent otherwise, like surrounding that icon that you're using, then I would definitely recommend writing alt text for it like that. But if not, then I would suggest you could mark that as decorative.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Did that help? Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah. I would say like 9 times out of 10, the icon is gonna have words that goes with it or copy or
Right.
something like that. But yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah. Cool. Um, and then lastly, so when we're writing our alt text, kind of just even like that question, right, that Mariah just had is one really important thing to keep in mind is that we should use the image's context to help us write meaningful alt text. So it definitely depends, kind of like there might be that aerial view of CU Boulder used in many, many different contexts. I could be using it to talk about the proximity of the Flatirons in the background to campus. I could be using it just on the front page of like a pamphlet, just for decorative purposes. I could be using it to talk about Folsom Field. I could be like how big it is or how big campus is. Like there's a lot of different contexts where we may be using the same image, and that will change the alt text of our images. So just keep that in mind that like it's not kind of an across the board when we're talking about alt text. It definitely might vary depending on the context and why you're using that image. So keep that in mind as you're writing it. One thing I kind of recommend and tell people to help if you are new to writing alt text, one thing that can be helpful to kind of get in that mindset is thinking like if you were talking on the phone with a friend, like how would you describe that to your friend over the phone? How would you describe that image to them over the phone? That could be a really helpful way to kind of get into that mindset of like verbally, or in this context it'll be written, but verbally describing an image and those visuals to help you write really meaningful and helpful alt text. Tom said, because/if our audience should be familiar with things CU, can we, for example, say Amber CU's buffalo mascot running down a football field, or a small buffalo across a football field? Just a random example. That's a great question. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of like different like nomenclatures and like branding kind of things that feel like either they should be much more expanded in terms of a description if it's like a broader audience that might not know that like our mascot's name is Chip, for example. What I kind of do to kind of cover all my bases, and it just kind of basic using your example again there, Tom, is if I was using an image of Chip, I would say CU Boulder's mascot Chip. Like that could be something to put kind of both in there, right? We're saying that this is that's Chip's name, or that's our mascot's name. It is CU Boulder's mascot. And then, carry on with the description there. So like still providing that context for someone who might not know that that's who Chip is, while also still, using the name for people that do know that that's Chip's name.
On a given page, kind of building off that, do you need to have look at each image as an individual, or can you assume that people have like read previous image descriptions on a page?
Oh, I get what you're saying. It's a good question. I would say I would stick with erring on the side of consistency. That's like a big thing that we kind of recommend as far as like making content accessible. Would be like we always kind of use this phrase, the F and 3 Cs, even though it sounds like we're saying bad words. That our F and 3 Cs is an acronym. It should be functional, it should be comfortable, it should be consistent, and it should be oh my gosh, I'm blanking on our third C. Oh my gosh, that's gonna drive me nuts. I'll figure it out later. But consistency is really important in terms of like digital accessibility. That context, when we use it in that context, we're talking more about like how I get to specific menu options on a web page should be consistent, right? I shouldn't have to relearn how to get to the main menu whenever I go to a new page. So that's kind of what that means more in that context when we're talking about consistency. But again, like even heading structure, things like that, like just remaining consistent is always going to be something that I would recommend erring on the side of versus kind of changing it up as you're going, maybe adding in more information or images throughout the content that you're creating. Any other questions, or just want to confirm that I'm answering the questions that everyone's asking, so hopefully those are helpful, or that I'm answering them fully. Okay, awesome. Oh, Tom, I saw a hand up and then I saw it go away. So
Yeah, I was going to give you a thumbs up, but yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, so some additional guidance here on writing alt text. One thing to keep in mind is that we should only be describing what's visually present on the image. So another thing to like, as far as adding in any sort of other information like historical or scientific data or information, that should be reserved more for something like an image caption versus alt text. Because when we're writing alt text, it is only what is on the image that we are writing. I'm going to cover an image caption versus alt text in the next slide, so I'll go into that a little more in detail next. But another thing to keep in mind is that you should always also keep like a very neutral tone when you're writing your alt text. Again, keeping that consistency throughout your alt text, and avoid additional commentary or opinions. Again, we're only describing what's visually there. We're not including anything, maybe how we feel about the image or what's there. If someone's having a bad hair day, I might be having a bad hair day in my headshot. That's not something that might still be visually apparent to some, but that's also an opinion. So that's something that we would keep out of our alt text. We are solely just saying, headshot of Allie Bartley, long brown hair, brown eyes, whatever other things we want to include in there to describe things that are visually there, not something that we might be thinking in our heads, but we don't need to include that. If you are writing alt text for any images that do have like text on them, kind of like Mariah was talking about with the health icon, if you are writing alt text and there are signs in the back or signs that are meaningful to the image and understanding that image, you should always include that in the alt text. So even like anytime I'm doing like a screenshot of the alt text field or something like that, I've got it on a couple next slides. Like I would say that, this is the screenshot of Microsoft's alt text field, Microsoft Word's alt text field with the that reads mark as decorative. Like that's one of the alt texts that I have here, because in that screenshot, that's what it says. And that's what I'm trying to convey when I'm writing the alt text for that image. So anytime there's text, make sure that is included, because that text is not going to be picked up by assistive technology. And then lastly, don't rely solely on automated generation to write alt text for you. Really make sure you are checking your work, checking any auto-generated alt text or using AI. They can be really helpful tools to get you started. They can give you a lot of good information to kind of start with, but we highly, highly, highly suggest that you do a manual check yourself. The context in which you're writing that image for, or that alt text for. That, kind of like we were talking about Chip, the mascot, CU Boulder mascot, that might not be something that AI knows. Always make sure that you are manually checking it to ensure that it makes sense for the context in which you're using it in, and that is accurately representing what's there. If you've ever added alt text on an image in Microsoft products or Microsoft Word, there's an auto generate alt text button for me, is what it says. And it gives the wildest auto generated alt text. And it also says like in the alt text field, AI generated with low confidence or may be inaccurate. So that is literally something that an end user would hear when they're coming across that image. So even if it gives you something good, still go in there and remove that part, because we do not want that to be read to an end user, right? That is not alt text. That's something that you as the content creator should make sure you're going back and reviewing and editing yourself. All right, image captions versus alt text. Just to give you kind of an example here, I mentioned this earlier. We're only writing in our alt text what's visually there. We're not including any historic or scientific, maybe data or information or context. So just to kind of give you an example of what I mean there, I've got an image on the screen of a giraffe standing in a field. So the alt text that I might write for that could be giraffe standing in a grassy field, in a dry grassy field. That would be alt text. That is just what I'm visually seeing here. So that's what I'm writing there. If I want to include an image caption, I could write anything I really wanted there that has to do with giraffes. So an image caption might say something like, giraffes are the tallest land animals on Earth, growing up to 18 feet, featuring unique spot patterns like fingerprints, and have very long purple black tongues. I cannot look at this image, right, and know that. I mean, maybe it's common knowledge that they're the tallest land animals on the earth. I think I did know that. But again, that is not what this image represents. It's just a giraffe standing in a dry, grassy field. I didn't know that they can grow up to 18 feet. Those aren't things I can look at and just know right off the bat. So that should not be included in my alt text. Any questions before we keep moving on? Okay. Next, I want to talk about decorative images, kind of a misconception that things that are digitally accessible might not be very pretty or stripping creative freedom. That's definitely not the case. You can use decorative images. It's totally up to you on where you're creating your content and what you're doing. If you do have images that you're like, I'm solely just putting there because it looks nice and it's a design choice I'm making, you should mark those images as decorative. That's a programmatic thing that you do. It depends on the platform in which you're working on, whether it gives you the option to mark things as decorative. Not every platform has that function. So if you are using a platform and adding an image for decorative purposes, make sure you confirm whether you can mark it as decorative. Because if it's marked as decorative programmatically, then assistive technology is essentially just going to bypass it. It's not even going to acknowledge that it's there or on the screen. It's assistive tech is just going to blow right through it because there's no meaningful information there, so we don't need to include anything. If we are using alt text and if we're using decorative images and we're using them in a platform where we do not have the option to programmatically mark them as decorative, make sure you are not just writing in your alt text field the word decorative image or something like that. Make sure you still write something. There should still be something there. Don't leave it blank. Don't write something like decorative. Still just give it something. It can be super short, broad, generic, vague. Just kind of like give it something, because again, if we're leaving out alt text, it's going to read the file name or just the word blank, and then that leaves an end user thinking, what am I missing? So if you can't write it, even aerial view of CU Boulder, that would be perfect if I did not have the option to mark it as decorative, but I'm using a decorative image. This is a screenshot from Microsoft Word or Microsoft Products alt text field. This is where you would write in the alt text. And right below it, there's just a checkbox that says mark as decorative. And that will essentially just gray out that alt text field for you. You can't add anything or edit anything there. And that will just let a screen reader know to just pretend like that image essentially doesn't exist because it's just there for cutesy decorative design purposes. Any questions about decorative images or anything we've covered so far? Okay. Lastly, just want to talk a bit about identity in alt text. So when we are using images of people, it's really important to understand or just think about contextually what is meaningful information to include about the people or person in the image if they are the subject of the image. One thing we recommend is asking yourself, are like identifying or demographic information meaningful and essential to understanding the image in its context? So the subject or the person or people's race, gender, disability, skin color, ethnicity, age, anything like that. Ask yourself if that is contextually important for an end user to understand that image and why you're using it. We're not here to say include those things or not. There also are a lot of things on that list and outside of that list that I can't look at somebody and just know right off the bat, right? I can't know the ethnicity of somebody just by looking at them or their gender or their race or their disability or their age. Those are things that I can't visually look at an image and just know. So I definitely do not want to make assumptions about people in the images that I'm using. However, that information still might be really important in the image that I'm using. The example I have here on the screen is a black and white image of a group of activists walking down a street, holding up a sign, and they are a very diverse group of individuals with varying disabilities. And so this is very contextually important because this is an advocate or a group of activists at a march. And so it is very contextually important to explain and describe that kind of information when I'm using an image like this. So to avoid making assumptions about the people in this image, while still kind of giving that detail to an end user who might not be able to visually see this image, I could write something like a group of activists with varying disabilities, racial identities, genders, and age demographics holding a sign that reads, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, Martin Luther King Jr." So it's still really kind of painting a picture of what is in this image without saying, this person is this and looks like this and it has this disability and is this age. I don't know those things. So we really don't want to make assumptions about people, right? Because they're going to potentially and probably will be inaccurate. And then there is a lot of information on the resource I have here on the slide is Identity and Alt Text resource. I wrote this in collaboration with the Leadership Support and Programming Office. And we took a much deeper dive into this topic if you want to read a bit more about this. And there are tons and tons of resources and information and articles about this topic. Representation is definitely very important, even if it's stock imagery or not. Representation for individuals is extremely important. So there are a lot of arguments for always including demographic or identifying information. Again, but there's always that, like, we don't want to make assumptions. So there's a lot of really great information in that resource. And a lot of other resources that are linked in that too. So if you want to take a deeper dive, please do. And then lastly here, if you are using an image and it's someone that ask them. I always say, like, write your own alt text, or what are things that you would like me to include in the alt text for this image of you. What you might write for somebody might not be what they would actually use to identify or describe themselves. So it's always good if you have that option to ask them what information they would want to include that they feel represents them. Any questions? Okay. So I have a page here with links to how to apply alt text in commonly used platforms on campus. How we apply it is going to vary depending on what platform we're on. So these are all linked to tutorials to Microsoft Office products, Google Suite products, Outlook, Canvas, WebExpress accessibility guidance is also linked there. There's information and tutorials on how you do it. Yeah. Please let me know if you have any questions, or if there's other resources that you'd like tutorials on. I do also have additional resources here for you that we offer in our office. We write a monthly newsletter that takes kind of a deep dive into a different accessibility or digital accessibility topic each month. So you can use that link to subscribe there if you'd like to learn more. We have tons and tons and tons of self-paced resources, so please feel free to use them. We have a LinkedIn page where we post a lot of different information about events or our office, or just like kind of smaller bite-sized tips about digital accessibility that you can follow along with. We have a lot of asynchronous training options as well. There's a digital accessibility fundamentals course that's in Canvas so you can self-enroll in. It's asynchronous. You can take it whenever you want and take as long as you want to finish it. There's also an asynchronous accessibility fundamentals for digital communicators, which obviously would be maybe a good one for this group. And it is an extensive course. They both take around an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and that is available system-wide through Skillsoft. And then our office, we are kind of broken up into 3 different groups. So I'm our training department. And we also have an assessment and usability testing team that is a group of end users who are native users to assistive technology and screen readers specifically that test different products, platforms, anything that CU wants to create themselves, wants to purchase, want to use for their course, whatever it might be. We can test different things for you and give you some insight and guidance on the accessibility of anything that you're creating, using, buying, whatever it might be. And then we also have a captioning and accessible media team that does helps and creates. We're starting an in-house captioning service so you can get videos captioned for free. Still working out the details on that. We're kind of still in a pilot phase a bit, but we can also just help with training on captioning and maybe audio descriptions if that's something you need. So lots and lots of other things that our office does outside of training. And if you'd like to contact us, you can reach us at digitalaccessibility@colorado.edu if you have any questions. And I also, as far as training goes, we might be doing more power hours. I might be here for more of them, but if you'd like synchronous training, you can always reach out to me at daotraining@colorado.edu. We can do customized training for just yourself, or if you work in a department and you think it'd be good for your whole team to get training, we can schedule that. I cover pretty much any topic you'd like. I do have kind of a list of trainings that are common trainings that I get requested a lot. So we can, any sort of training that you might want, you can always reach out to us. They're free. You can do as many as you'd like. Totally up to you. But we have lots and lots of training options if that's something you're interested in.